Welcome back. I'm finally back for another episode of Talk About It with Ty. I took a little bit of a recording break for the past 2 weeks or so. I went out of town, and when I got home, I got this really strange allergic reaction around my eyes and my face. My eyes were all like swollen and red, and then they were like dry and flaky. I was looking crusty and crazy the past 2 weeks. I wasn't recording nothing, but I'm back now, and it's perfect timing because it is the end of the season. And as the season wraps up and we're going into the finale, it just makes me so nostalgic thinking about my journey on Destination X and the journey getting to Destination X, which is the subject of today's episode. I'm going to be talking about how I prepared for Destination X. I touched on it briefly in a couple of my exit interviews, but I didn't have a lot of time to go totally in depth. That's what I want to do today. And it's going to be a little bit of a show and tell episode because some of the study aids that I used to prepare, I still have with me. So I'm going to show that to you guys. First things first, getting on Destination X, it's a brand new show. Where do you start, right? My first line of thinking was, I have to find out if this show has been recreated anywhere else. Just naturally in life, that's just like a quality trait of mine. I'm a very prepared person. I do not like walking into situations unprepared, whether it's professionally or personally. I'm going to figure out and know what I'm walking into and know what I got to do. I spent weeks looking up this show and trying to figure out if it had been replicated before, and it had. When I was in the casting process, it had already been created in Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. I was scouring the internet. I was looking all over the place. I'm like downloading VPNs. I'm not like a tech person, so I didn't know what I was doing, but I gotta be able to watch the show and see see what they did, see what I might be doing. And eventually I was able to get the first season that I got was the Netherlands. So I watched that one first. And then later in the summer, I was able to find and get the French version as well. Those are the two that I watched. And I took notes on everything. This is my study notebook. You can see this is my first page. I have like France, and I put all the countries they went to. And for the Netherlands, all the countries they went to here too. And yeah, for the Netherlands version, oh my gosh, I was stalking the cast on Instagram. So I would put Instagram episode 3 and things like that. When I would find like certain behind the scenes pictures or certain things on their pages, I would like write down it on here too. From just even figuring out from these 2 seasons the countries that they went to, that's already valuable information. Going into Destination X, I had known that in the past, in the other versions, they had went to Venice both times. I went in thinking I need to study Italy, and there's a good chance that we might be going to Venice. Super fun fact, in the Netherlands version, when they went to Venice, they did do a gondola challenge with the Venetian mask, with the having to, I mean, like, pretty much the same as like what we did, right? After I got eliminated and I heard about it, I was like, dang. And then especially when I watched it, I'm like, I was prepared for that. I knew there was going to be a Venice challenge with the mask. Like, I knew it. That was something that I studied a lot. And in both seasons, they had also just went to Italy twice. I like, even though we had went to Rome, see y'all, and I couldn't even tell nobody this. Even though we had went to Rome in the first stop, because I had watched these, I was like, I have a feeling we're gonna come back and we're gonna go to Venice. I was always in the back of my mind, just anticipating at some point in the game we would go to Venice again. And I didn't tell anybody that on the bus. Both seasons they went to Italy twice. They had also, one of those stops was always Venice. They had both went to Germany. Yep, I studied a lot of Germany. They both went to Croatia. I studied a lot of Croatia. They both went to Slovenia, baby. I was my Slovenia. Yes, I studied a lot of Slovenia. And I think these are the only ones that they have in common. I think Austria too. No. You only went to Austria, but Austria, Czech Republic. I think that's about it in Greece. So I spent a lot of my time studying, kind of like those countries because I figured those would also be places that we went. And then I also had studied the route that they took, within it so that, just to have an idea of, okay, they went down, they looped around, like, do they double back? Will they go east, west, to try and throw you off? Is it like a loop? Is it linear? Just trying to look for patterns and things. So for me to keep in mind when I was in the game. So for each episode, when I got this, it didn't come in English, didn't come with English captions. So I had to translate all this myself. And in doing so, because it took so freaking long, I wrote out, like, I would describe everything that happened. I would write what the challenge was, what the, how they played the challenge, how the teams were divided, just so I could, like, again, understand how this game is played and how this game is constructed, how it works. And I would write out when they had like certain like trivia questions within their challenges. I wrote that out too. So there's a couple in here. What episode is this? This is episode 2. Oh yeah, I have it at the top. Bestimming X. Bestimming X. Let's see. What small country is sandwiched between France and Spain? Andorra. What is the name of Berlin's underground metro subway? The U-Bahn. Yeah, stuff like that. This one, what country has a harp and clover as a national symbol? Ireland, the shamrock. Yeah. This one, I remember this episode with these trivia questions. I would just make flashcards out of them. I remember when I was watching, I was kind of like, okay, I think I'm kind of getting this. I think I'm going to be pretty good for this. I was very, very nervous about playing Destination X in particular because when I started the casting process, I had never been to Europe before. So it was scary. It was scary. I was like, I have to like learn as much as I can. And I have to try to go to at least one of those countries this summer, which I did. I ended up going to 2 that summer, which made me feel a little bit better. But, I still went out the way I went out. So it's not gonna make a big difference. But yeah, when I would back to watching the Dutch version did give me that was the main one that I studied. I wasn't able to find the French version until maybe like 3 weeks until I flew out for Destination X. So I did watch it, but I didn't study it as in depth as I did with this one because I had more time with this one. I would, try to do some of like the types of challenges that they did. I would try to do them myself just to get some practice, especially if it was something new. So, for example, they had this one challenge where they were split into 2 teams, and one team had to solve like clues and do tasks within a moving train. And the other team had to do tasks, but they were whitewater rafting. So they had to like raft to one point, do something, raft to another point, do something, and whoever made it to the end the quickest won. So when I saw that, light bulb went off. I was like, I've never whitewater rafted before. I need to do that. They had another challenge where this was crazy. They had to bungee jump blindfolded with the goggles on. And when I watched that, there was one player who she couldn't do it. Her nerves got the best of her and she didn't jump. And I think the reward for jumping is like the goggles would go clear. And I'm pretty sure it showed them like the flag of the country that they were in. I think it was Montenegro. And, she didn't get it. And, because she's, her fears got to her, she wasn't able to do it. And I just thought to myself, I was like, okay, bungee jumping is one of those things that I'm not inclined to try. I'm not afraid of heights, but I can be kind of height hesitant in certain situations. I mean, I've done skydiving and I wasn't afraid of that, and I'll do it again. But like bungee jumping, something about that is always just kind of like, no, I think I'm good on that one. But when I saw them do it on Destination X, I said, okay, well, I got to do something because I'm sorry, I want to end up like her, and I'm too afraid to do it. And now, I missed out on a clue. Now I'm going home. We got to do it, Ty. So I was working as a flight attendant at the time. I had booked a long layover in Charlotte, North Carolina, because I had looked it up and I knew that they had a white water rafting center there. I think it's called this like the U.S. National White Water Rafting Center, something like that. It's like a really simple title. So I went there and they have like tons of activities. So I just did everything I could. I did do whitewater rafting for the first time. It was a little scary. It was a little scary because if you're not, coordinated with the team and sitting at the right angle and holding on right and bracing right, that you will flip out. I almost flipped out like legitimately one time and I was like, okay, this is serious. Even though it was like a man-made river or whatever, it was rough. The water was rough, but I was happy that, I was able to do it. The people that I was with, it was just strangers I met that day. They were fun. They were they were cool. We had a blast. We were able to get through it. And I was like, okay, good. I know I can do these things. I just didn't want the first time of me doing it to be in a competition where, maybe I am stressed or I'm under pressure and I'm freaked out or, whatever, and scared all at the same time and then trying to perform. I'm like, no, let me practice these things now off the show. So then when I get on the show, if I have to do them, I'm like, okay, I've done this before. Like, I know what to expect. And, I know I can do it. So I did do that. And I did like climbing. I did ropes courses. I did zip lining. I did do kayaking. And they also did have like I call it like a mini bungee jump. Because when I think about bungee jumping, I think about like, off like a dam or something. But they did have a bungee jump there. So I did it. And that was the one activity, like, I remember after I like climbed all the way up and I was up there and I was on the platform and the person in front of me was going and I'm like looking, like I see like the treetops and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? But I did it. I actually did it 3 times. The first time I was hesitant and it was kind of like, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. And I'm like, wait. And they're like, all right, you ready now? And I'm like, no. The first time I did hesitate. And then after I did it, I was like, okay, that wasn't so bad. But I gotta do it again. So then I did it 2 more times and I closed my eyes when I stepped off so that I would get, just practice that feeling of jumping blindfolded because I was like, I might have to do this on Destination X. So better get the jitters and the nerves out now because when there's money on the line, we don't have time for hesitation. We do not have time for that. I wanted to make sure I was going to be good. And going into Destination X, I really was like expecting and looking forward to thrilling challenges and things that, were going to get my adrenaline pumping. I like stuff like that. So anyways, another way that I prepared for Destination X was simply by going to the library. I'm a nerd. I love to study. I love the library. And I went there to, just get some books so I can make flashcards of some, geography and trivia facts. And I would rent out children's encyclopedias. And I rented those out to study from because number one, I'm a visual learner. So, just being able to have the information in a picture, that's just going to sink together in my mind. Like, okay, I see this. And then also because like children's books and children's encyclopedia, they're organized, they're succinct, they're to the point. You're going to get the high level information, that you need, things that are pertinent. It was organized, their the country's flowers or their currency, their languages, geography, this and that, customs, festivals. It was great. I got a wealth of knowledge and information from those. So I would rent out children's books and study from those. I would also go to a local cafe called Board and Brew. It's in College Park. And the concept of it is that it's a cafe and kind of small restaurant type vibe. They actually have a really, really great menu, but they also have like hundreds of board games. And I think the fee is like $6 per person. And you can just hang out, order food or not, and just play board games all day. So I had been there before and I specifically went back multiple times over the summer to keep playing as many board games as possible. So I would focus on trivia board games, especially like pop culture, because I had a feeling there was going to be an emphasis of that within Destination X. It was in the European versions that I watched. So I knew that I had to study more pop culture and then also dexterity games. So in other reality competitions too, but in Destination X, like the European versions that I saw, they did have a few games where similar to like the board game Operation, where you need to have a steady hand and like move an object through narrow spaces and it's like metal around it. And if you buzz the side, then you're out. They had to do that on, it was the Dutch version of Destination X. And I said, okay, well, let me practice that too. I didn't play Operation there, but I did play some other dexterity board games. And I want to practice being under pressure, being frustrated, working with small objects, trying to keep my hand steady, trying to do it, under like a time limit. So I constantly just wanted to practice and develop these skills and just keep doing them so that they would be fresh and that I would be confident in them. So then let's say if I was in a certain situation on the show where we're in a team and we have to pick someone to do something particular, I can say with confidence, okay, I know I'm good at this, like I know I got this. So yeah, that's one way that I prepared as well. Also, memory games. I would play a lot of memory games, like matching games. I actually don't have it. I have a couple of the other ones that I bought. I couldn't find this one, but believe it or not, I had a memory matching game. It was cards and it was art based. So like famous painters. And of course there were Van Gogh paintings in there. And how ironic that, I just totally missed the Jeffrey Clue with him and the Van Gogh styled painting in the episode that I got out of. So I guess that one didn't really help me a whole lot. But I'm going to show you some of the other games that I had. Oh yeah, I remember this one. This is Marble Circuit, so like a brain game. I really like stuff like this anyways. So I would just play like logic games and things like that. Things just like I said, always keeping my brain sharp and working in this type of way. This is for ages 8 and up. I do recommend it. This one is pretty challenging. I like this one. I would like legitimately be sitting like in my room trying to get the pattern right. So yeah, and I think you can play with two people, or I would play with a friend sometimes, but this one is good. I like this one a lot, and I think this was good just to keep like logic and critical thinking skills sharp. So that I felt like was a good investment. And then I have this Culture Treks. This was my best friend all of summer of 2024. Like me and Culture Treks, I wore this game out. I found it on Amazon. It is, yeah, it's the international card game, just like that. So it's a like a team game, like you play with people, but it's really just like trivia kind of based. So sometimes I would just study and look at the cards myself. So they have 5 different categories, and so this one is superstitions. And it's you have to read the question to the other player and you give them the different options and they have to guess which country. But this is international, so it's not just limited to Europe. So what I would do is I would pick out the European ones and then only play there. Or if I did pick one and it didn't have any European kind of like answers on it, I'd be like, okay, let's just go to the next one. The categories were superstitions, customs, do's and taboos. I like this one a lot because it taught you certain things about culture. And food and drink, that one was also very, very helpful, learning certain facts. And then holidays and festivals, this one was good too. So I would play it by myself. I would play with my family. We had like a family game night playing this one night. And my friends, just whoever, I was always trying to play or look at those cards for Culture Treks. And let's see, and the last one I have here is Shape Makers. This one I got from a Brain Games store, and it's okay. I think it just wasn't challenging enough for me, so I don't think it was that helpful. But you pretty much like get a card with like some kind of picture on it, and then you have to try to like make it with only like a certain amount of shapes. I think it's just something that, like I said, I don't know what the age is for this one. It doesn't say. So either it was just, I don't know, maybe it's just something I was just really good at, but this one I didn't feel like I got a whole lot from, but it was still cool. And I also would do trivia nights at restaurants, especially when I would be on layovers. I would just kind of like look up if there is a pub or, a restaurant nearby that had trivia night. I'll be like, okay, let me just go be on a random team or be by myself and just try. So I would do that. And I also would do kind of going back to the memory matching a little bit, the memory matching games. I would also study different types of techniques for memorization, because not only on Destination X, like from what I had seen from the other European versions, but just in general, reality television competition shows, especially one that's, the type I was on, which is like, kind of, it's not just like physical competitions, there's going to be mental competitions. You have to rely on, like knowledge and things like that. I knew that a memory was going to come in play at some point. So I would study different techniques to memorize things. And I used one of those techniques in episode 2 when we were in Switzerland during the cabin challenge. It wasn't shown on the edit, but for each of the bells that I had, those first 5 bells, I actually memorized them by using sign language. So I am fluent in American Sign Language. And with me, with something like that, where it's just like one word, tactile memory, I'm like, let me use that to my advantage. So I like did my 5, I can't remember what they were. It was like boat. There's something with like water that I had. I don't know if I had the piggy bank, but I just was like, doing them, and I would just do them in order, just do them in order. So while Jeffrey's talking and while Allie's trying to recite hers and everything else is happening, I'm just doing the same handshakes over and over and over again, because I know with me that tactile memory is going to stick. So that was like one of my strategies. I went in the game, I'm like, there's ever memory and there's an opportunity to use it to my advantage with sign language so that I don't get like tongue tied or, too many things. Like if somebody's trying to like say something out loud to throw everybody else off, like I don't even have to listen to that. I can just keep moving my hands in the same shapes and I'm never going to forget. So That's one way that I kind of prepared myself for the show. I also watched a lot of trivia shows. I watched Jeopardy all the time. I watched old episodes of Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Old episodes of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And also, there was like a newer show on Netflix. It was called, I think it's just called Bullshit, the game or something like that. And it is a trivia show where they have to, answer these trivia questions. And if you don't know it, you just kind of have to like bullshit your way and explain the answer. And then the other contestants have to guess whether you have the right answer and you know it, or you just like are bullshit and you're probably wrong. So I did watch that quite a bit, and The Beast too. I like The Beast. That Beast trivia game is really good too. And with Bullshit, I remember when I watched it, I was thinking like I probably wouldn't be good at this show because I'm not a good bullshitter. And as we saw in Destination Next, yeah, I'm not a good bullshitter. I'm not a good liar. So I feel like that's honestly what I should have practiced. I should have practiced like bullshitting and lying for a social strategy game. But yeah, so also on my layovers, I would put more of an emphasis on exercising. So I would use the gyms, and then when I would be at home, I would use the gym sometimes, but I always wanted to stay just more physically active. I knew that there were going to be physical competitions, and I knew that there were going to be athletic people cast on the show, way more athletic than me. I knew we were going to have, big beefy guys. I figured we would probably have at least one woman that was an athlete or just had, a lot of athletic capabilities. So I didn't want to be at the back of the pack and everybody looking at me like, oh, she's kind of weak. I was lifting more and cardio. I did a lot more emphasis on cardio. And it doesn't really feel like that helped a lot because let me tell you, Paris, that maze challenge, whoa, Shane is so fast. And I'm just huffing. I could not keep up with him. Oh my gosh. But I was of the mind that I knew that I was going to have to like exert myself physically, and being in physical shape would be important to winning challenges. So I did do that. I did do a bit of swimming, swam a few laps. Like I said, just getting, just conditioning myself again. I did focus on physical conditioning. I also, to prepare, I would watch a lot of pop culture movies and documentaries. So, for example, there was like in one of the Destination X versions, I think both of them went to Austria, but they would have challenges and red herrings about Arnold Schwarzenegger and his films and things like that. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, I don't watch his movies. So I'm like over here watching the Terminator and shit. Like I'm studying all the movies that he's been in just in case. And then I also would try to watch documentaries that have some kind of like European focus to them. So really like that whole summer when if I was watching something on TV, it had to be something that I thought might help me in Destination X. So I remember specifically there was a destination. There was a documentary that I watched on Netflix, and it was about like the manager for Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, but they had like recorded or yeah, I think they recorded their first album in, I forgot already, somewhere in Europe, I forgot. But it did kind of like tie in with like Europe a bit because like that's where they had kind of like started out some of their careers. So for example, I watched that. But I also just tried to watch more pop culture movies, like older movies that I hadn't seen or I hadn't seen in a while, understanding who directed them, because again, those were things that I had seen on the European version that came up as clues or red herring. So I wanted to be clear, either way. I also just would do puzzles. I just have puzzles. I didn't bring any with me right now, but I like puzzles just in general. So I would do puzzles. And like I said, brain games. I would download like brain games on my phone. So I would do those. I always had my flashcards with me. My flashcards were always in my purse 24/7. Whenever I would be sitting idle, I would whip out my flashcards. Like, especially if I was at the nail salon getting a pedicure, I'm up there with my flashcards. I was just always just going over information over and over and over again. And do I think that it helped me? Yes, I really do think that it helped me. I think the hardest part of going on Destination X, particularly for our cast, was simply being the first ones and not having a season prior to us to study from or, kind of get an idea of how to prepare for. So, all of the preparation I did all summer, my mantra was I'm only investing my time and my money into things that are going to help me get this $250,000. So I'd even told some of my friends, I'm like, look, I'm not having no hot girl summer. I'm not out here partying in no clubs. You want to hang out or do something? Can we go to, can we play trivia? Can you play culture treks with me? Want to do an escape room? I did an escape room with one of my friends, but I got to be doing something that's going to help me towards my goal. And I think, like I said, I think it did help. Another thing that was kind of, I was mentally prepared for, the mental preparation, I think is also really important, was the shock of having new players. So in both of them, in the French and the Dutch version, they had new players introduced midway, and it was done differently both times. But in me watching them and learning from them, what I was studying and what I was gathering from it is, okay, how do people react in this situation? How do these new players come in? What twists or advantages do these new players come with? And I mean, it was totally different than how we had ours. Totally, totally, totally different. But the one thing that there was, like, one of them, I think it was the Dutch one, where they had an option. They could either like kind of like let the person on the bus, like as a group consensus, they could decide, or they could like battle it out against them. And if they won or they did something, it was like a race type of thing. If they raced to the rest of the group in time, then they won. They get to join the bus. And everybody else was trying to do a task to prevent them from coming on. So just by like knowing that within this game, at least in the other versions, they had new players coming in, I think that did help prime, kind of just like I said, the mental preparation. So Janae and Peter coming in, I mean, it's still shocking to some degree because you're like, what, really? But for me, like, really, when I first met Janae, I was surprised, just because like at first I didn't like understand what was happening. I thought that she was like, in that maze challenge, we had different like actors that were like the statutes, and they were like handing us, like the clues or whatever when we found them in the maze. I thought she kind of went along with that. I was just being slow. I didn't really get it. But then when I did get it, automatically my mind went to, okay, how can I use this? Because I know, number one, I know people that I've been with. And I just know from seeing this on the other seasons that they're not gonna, nobody's gonna really respond favorably to this. So how can I try and use this to my advantage? I didn't see them coming in as a bad thing if you know how to leverage it. So unfortunately, I was not able to leverage it. But I was of the mind to. I was of the mind to. I couldn't pull it off. I kind of did too much. But but yeah, just even knowing that. And I didn't tell them that, I was thinking or I was seeing it that way, or that I had watched the other versions, and that I was pretty much like going into Destination X. I was mentally prepared that at some point there's going to be a twist and they're probably going to have a new player in the game. I just thought it was going to happen more similar to the way that the European versions did it, not the way that we did it. And the way that we did it, like I said, it threw me off so much, because yeah, the fact that it was two players, that's what was really, really different, because they did not have two players in the other ones. It was only one. So having two, that was something really different for us. But yeah, I think that's about it. That is everything that I did to prepare for Destination X. I had a lot of fun preparing for it. I challenged myself. I did a lot of fun activities and watched new things and learned a lot of new things. I'm just a nerd at heart. I love learning. I love studying. So I had a lot of fun preparing for it. And I had even more fun actually playing. And that's a wrap on how I prepared for Destination X. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for my next episode. I'm going to be sitting down with Kiki and doing an Ask Me Anything. I took a bunch of questions from different fans, comments online, and I had like an AMA open for a short period of time on my Instagram story. So we put all that together, and I'm going to sit down with her and we're going to talk and laugh about it and have a great time. So see you then. Bye.